Okay, and we've been working with this little koala picture, and that's fine. And something I want to show you is we're just going over kind of the basic tools: the selection tool, the clone brush tool, the paint brush tool. There's a lot of other things that Photoshop has. It certainly isn't meant to be an all-purpose kind of thing, but I just want to kind of get you used to the layout. You've got your layers on the side. We have lots of little panels where you can bring up the different attributes to brushes, and you can see histograms, which are color values. You have your navigator, which will allow you to move around and kind of zoom in and kind of get into the image a little bit, kind of being able to move. Those are tools that I use quite a lot. Understanding how to choose a brush profile and selecting more brush profiles are important. In the types of things we're doing in this class, we're going to be doing little bits of kind of painting, but mostly it'll be image manipulation and just kind of modifying pictures. So with that, I want to look at a couple other things that you can do with Photoshop. Now, one of the neat things about Photoshop is that it allows you to work with what's called modes, and modes allow you to mix colored pixels together in a way. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new layer here, and I'm going to call this a gradient. And I'm going to choose, I'm just going to choose a foreground color, which will be a blue. And it doesn't have to be exactly what I choose, and a background color, which I'm going to choose a different color. So blue, I'm going to choose a warmer tone, so maybe like an orange. And then into my gradient layer, I'm going to make a gradient. This is a layer. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to choose a different kind. All right. And so that is on the top. So one of the things I want you to see is when you begin to manipulate things with modes, the modes will take colors from the upper layers and blend them with the layers below. So I just added a darken mode to the gradient layer. Here's my gradient layer, and when I do that, it begins to blend and mix pixel values. So now I have a bluish to a warm color blend. And these are algorithms that are created and used to take pixel number values, like a red value of 45 might be added to whatever that blue color is on top to get a new value, a new number, which is a different color. And so with that, I can actually create interesting visual effects here by blending these together. Some of the blend modes create lightening effects where they lighten colors. Some of them create darkening effects. Some of them create light effects. This section darkens. All of these will darken colors. All of these will lighten colors, and these will all produce a lighting effect here. Soft light, vivid light, hard light. And when you do that, you can produce some really interesting things. Now, I just created a simple gradient here. But what if I added an image? Say I added another picture. So I'm going to create a picture. So I'm going to go to my file, and I'm going to say open. And I can go to my picture, these sample pictures, and I'm going to choose a picture with some colors in it. I'm going to take this garden one picture. It's going to open that up in a separate element, and I'm going to hit Control A and select it, and Control X to cut it. I'm going to go back to my koala creeper, and I'm going to hit Control Shift V, and it's going to paste it right there in my picture layer. Now when I go up to these modes, I can go through these different modes, and I can see how it begins to blend the upper pictures together with the lower pictures. Now I have this picture selected, And I can move it around, and you can still see, I'm just going to move it over so you can kind of see the original picture versus the modified picture with the blend mode on it. Now, depending on the kind of modes that I use will change the effect that I get. And with that, you can kind of come up with some interesting effects. You might want to use something like this for, I would experiment with it, but it can be quite interesting. And it can produce some interesting things, like this psychedelic colors. And of course, you can always reduce its quality. You can take that layer and change its opacity. And if you do that, it kind of makes a really interesting photograph. And so those kind of things are tips and tricks that you can use. If I was to go back here and choose this, I could lower down the opacity value by sliding this over. And I could give my image a really nice tint. And so modes are really interesting things to use. Another thing that you can do is you can change a picture's color values, or I'm going to load up and open up another picture. I'm going to say open. And I'm going to go to this sea turtle picture, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to hide the bottom layer, and I'm going to choose this. These are called adjustment layers. When I click on that, I can add a new adjustment layer, and when I do this is going to give me something interesting. I'm going to go to brightness and contrast, and when I do that, I can control that layer's specific image and contrast values. So I can increase the contrast, lower those things. Okay. If I can add another one that might change hue and saturation. So if you'll notice that it's building on top of one another. So I've got a hue and saturation. Well, that means that I can actually change hue values within my image. I can actually start to manipulate things like I'm doing here. I'm pulling out or removing color values. I can pull out the color altogether to kind of pull out some of those values, tone it down, darken it up. I'm going to undo those a little bit. 1, 2. Oops, go back. I went too far. So I'm going to choose my layer, go down to my adjustment layer, go to hue and saturation. But I can also pull out or pull out, say, just the blues. So if I pull out the blue values, I can pull some of those values out, change their brightness, and I'm not changing the others. I can pull those out, or maybe I can increase the saturation values of those blues and increase their color value. So wherever there are blues, I can change that. If I go in and change, say, the yellows, let's say I want to make those yellows less saturated. If I pull out the saturation values on those yellows, I pull those tones down. So that's kind of interesting. There are some custom value changes that you can choose. Increase saturations, old style. I can boost reds. I don't have many reds in this image. I can go to a sepia. I can go to strong. I can boost yellows. I can go to the default. And so you can see the changes in it. And so with that, I want to show you something else. If I took this and I made a copy of it by dragging it, I'm going to pull it and push it to the very top here. I can turn off these color values so that I can see. Here, let me start from scratch. That way you can see this from the very beginning. Now, here is my main image. I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to hide this. So here's this. I can hide it, and there it is. I'm going to duplicate it. Right click and say duplicate layer. And if I add an adjustment layer to this, I'm gonna just go to Hue and Saturation, and I'm going to change the hue of this image to something like this. Okay, now I have orange and purples. Now if I leave it as is and I hide this layer, it's actually changing the hue and saturation for all of these layers. Well, I don't necessarily want that. I just wanted to change the hue and saturation to this particular layer. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn this off so it only affects this particular layer. So if I hide that layer, these settings are only affecting that one. And then if I take this and then if I added a blend mode to that, so I get a whole nother type of picture. So what's interesting about this is that as you can begin to take images that you have, you can change things up so much and experiment with different colors and different looks, things that you have never perhaps thought of before. And because of different combinations of blend modes and adjustment layers, you can end up with some really interesting things through experimentation. And so by doing some experimentation, you can really change up the way your image looks. So you don't always have to stay with with what you've got. So if I go to colorize, well, let me turn off. So if I go to colorize on this layer, I can actually choose a hue that I want to color. So if I'll say I wanted to make it all purple, I could take these purple values, adjust their saturations, add a blend mode of some sort, and I get a different look. Remember, the original is this, and when I start to blend colors, I get this. So with the experimentation, you can do a lot with blend modes. It's quite interesting what you can come up with, and this is used a lot in motion graphics, animations, where you see a lot of interesting stylings and treatments to images. And so experimenting with color modes can really provide some exciting new combinations of colors that you wouldn't necessarily expect, things that you might not be able to make yourself, you might not come up with it, you might discover it by experimenting with blend modes and layering images over one another.